I think it's time for a check-in on AI, don't you? AI has been in the IT space for a while now, and it's reshaped a lot of what we do. But while adoption has skyrocketed, ROI hasn't always kept pace. In fact, many companies are still struggling to make their AI investments pay off. So the question is, why? To help us unpack that, I brought in someone who knows this space inside and out. Christian Thilmany, Senior Director of AI and Strategy at Microsoft. With more than a decade of driving enterprise adoption, he's seen what makes AI work and why so many efforts fall short. In this episode, we'll complete the check-in. Where has AI really evolved? How do we measure its true impact? And what connective tissue do we need so our systems work in harmony with AI? If any of that sounds interesting, don't click away. You've been at Microsoft for 26 years. A big part of it has been in AI.
I guess I was in AI before it was really cool in 22 December when ChatGPT changed the world. So yeah, I've had the pleasure of doing something I love. And I was doing that probably about 10 years before the world got caught on fire.
So, I mean, when you think back over the last 10 years, what was the moment where you realized that there was something big brewing that was going to have a lot of momentum?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I saw the writing on the wall with AI. I mean, AI has been around a long time, but I think when deep learning really made some strides and hit in the organization out of Toronto, really revolutionized how AI was going from narrow to broader. And now our push for AGI, artificial general intelligence, I just saw the potential, and then I wanted to be part of it. So I did everything I possibly could at Microsoft to be part of it. And then eventually I had a great opportunity to drive AI strategy for our chief digital office. So that really made it interesting. And it made something that was always something that was a kind of a 80% of the time would fail. There were so many failure projects just because either the data wasn't there or the expertise wasn't there.
The needle has moved significantly, but yet a lot of research reports that are out there saying that a lot of AI projects actually fail, even though when so many people use the technology and they see how powerful it is. What is separating the organizations that make it work from those that the 95% supposedly that fail?
Back in the day, it was bad data in, bad data out. It was not being able to, no pun intended, predict what if the predictions were going to be valuable. I think once you had good data and the predictions were valuable, it was still very difficult to completely deploy something that was successful and didn't result in what we call model drift, where things go awry very quickly. You had issues with bias and just complexity and expertise. Data scientists became very popular and then became very rare in finding ones that were really good. So it was a different kind of challenge. And I think today now you have obviously the hallucinations challenges. So you obviously have the model can hallucinate. Some levels of prediction may not be accurate. Precision, and especially initially, precision was an issue. Predictability was an issue. And I think we've solved a lot of that. I mean, it still does hallucinate and there's still issues, and now you have sycophancy as an issue. These models become sycophants. They want to please you to the point of detriment to your project, right? You have to be very careful on how you prompt them, for example. It's a different kind of failure.
Organizations that are claiming success, right, are maximizing the value of whatever solution they've implemented. I mean, so we have to talk about measurement, right? We need some sort of stadiometer to quantify whether we're getting value or ROI out of some sort of implementation. I saw recently there's a new metric, the levelized cost of AI, that looks at both upfront and operational costs. I mean, what are your thoughts on that metric or others when it comes to tracking the benefit of AI?
Yeah, I don't think there's any one way of tracking benefit. I think those models, to your point, are just now emerging. I think we've been so preoccupied with measuring the effectiveness of the predictability and precision and reasoning accuracy of these models with benchmarks, whether it be human eval benchmark for coding to some of the other benchmarks just for measuring whether or not it can do mathematical reasoning equal to an eighth grader or something more sophisticated. We're eclipsing some of those benchmarks. The models are getting smarter. And I think now that we can rely on them more, now companies are saying, okay, there's use here, but how do we measure that use? How do we measure the value? And that's also the problem with LLMs and Gen AI. And it's so broad. It's like, how do you measure the value of a human being who may act as your assistant, right? It all depends on the human you hire and how effectively you are at training them. Are you giving them resources to be intelligent and provide intelligent responses? Is your culture enabling that human being to effectively grow and add value as well? So there's so many factors, and that I see this as a similarity with Gen AI, these assistants, or call them a co-pilot, or just an LLM in general, helping you with different phases of a workflow, whether it be content creation or insights or routing or task generation and task automation. There's so many ways to generally apply a Gen AI solution. You have to measure it based on the task or the use case you're providing. Some things you can do very well, and some things that really require more digital handholding, if you will, with these models. And I think that's what I think we as humans are figuring out. And I keep going back to the analogy of a person. The model is only as good as what you tell it to be. And sometimes people think the models are so good that it could read your mind, and it can't. And so the work with prompt engineering and context specificity is incredibly important, more solid. In fact, that's the new paradigm. It can generate code faster than it takes for product managers to define the specs and the system context that it needs to be successful. So I think that's the point we're at right now, is the prompts and the past prompt engineering, but the context engineering that goes along with it.
I think creating those metrics at the upfront, understanding where we believe having that hypothesis, the priors of where we believe we're going to be getting value out of things, and putting in observability or other tools to capture metrics. And then as organizations are executing on this, right, they need to be adjusting what it is they're observing and how they're measuring oftentimes. We've also seen the rise of shadow AI. Right? Employees are using tools outside of the company walls just because they just want to be more efficient.
That's right.
What have you heard or what have you observed in your travels of the benefits and risks of shadow AI?
100%. And that gets into a couple of things. So one, it's interesting. We reach out to partners. There's one thing that is pervasive on many of them is we're finding out by the time you go back to work with them on AI, they have shadow AI solutions already built. Like, hey, we already solved this problem. And that's because you have this emerging thing called vibe coding. They're building these solutions using vibe coding to help automate the code generation, whether it be GitHub Copilot or Cursor or Claude Code or whatever tool that they're using to generate the code. And that's great initially. And they probably have solved some of the problems, especially if they're doing POCs. However, they go down that route too much. Vibe coding can become a nightmare. And we're seeing that more and more as that code base gets more sophisticated. The code generators struggle. And so I anticipate, and it hasn't happened quite yet, but I anticipate partners coming back to us to say, hey, let's re-engineer this thing the right way so we know exactly what's going on, because there's a lot of vibe code generation that needs to be cleaned up now. And by the time they do, they would have done a better job had they really started from scratch, or at least been more purposeful in the engineering that went into the development instead of just relying on vibe coding to get something out the door. So we're definitely seeing shadow AI become a big problem, even more than it used to be with shadow IT.
What I've experienced so far is that using generative AI to write code is very powerful. You can sit down and you can write out what you need for a ticket, and it's like handing it to a junior developer that then turns it around in 3 to 5 minutes, and it's time for you to code review it. But the human in the loop is the key piece there, right? It's the mid-level, the senior architect that is creating the architecture in the ticket, right? And it's the senior mid-level architect that's doing the code review before you're committing it. And in the absence of an entity that can see the bigger picture, think about the bigger picture, which oftentimes isn't fully realized, especially when you're writing code, creating a product at that level of speed. Like you said, you can end up with a lot of spaghetti. You can create a lot real quick, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is efficient, secure, well tested, right?
Yeah. System tested, especially. Code generators do a great job of unit testing. But again, unless you prompt them to go through the code base every time and get a better sense of system context, architectural context. And I think this is where MCP is coming into play. And not all code generators do a great job with this, but when they do, it's magic. And it makes your job so much more fun because you don't have to do the routine stuff. You don't have to sit there and manually look up best practices. MCP, there's MCP wrapping Azure, so you can deploy on Azure with the code generator. GitHub Copilot does a good job of this. Or it can even look up documentation on best practices to deploy it the right way, right? So it is getting better, but you still have to be hyper aware of what to tell the code generator on what to do. That's kind of where we're at right now. I assume that's going to get much better, but that is a big problem.
Even more so now than before, building security in from day one is much more important. These tools that can build code incredibly fast can also be used to attack said code incredibly fast. We're using frameworks that we don't know where all the vulnerabilities are, and we're moving them into production fast. Because of those security issues, organizations are putting in processes that ends up in bureaucracy, slowing down innovation for the purpose of making sure things are done properly, data governance, cybersecurity threats, etc. From your perspective, what needs to shift for organizations to be able to ride the adoption curve and not chase it while remaining safe?
There's a couple things in there to tease out, and security is a challenge 100%, more so than ever. And that just because the attack vectors are always going to be there, and they're always going to be, they tend to be a challenge in today's age, right? You always have problematic bad actors, if you will. But the attack surface is larger than ever. I mean, think about it. You had an API, you had a field you'd enter online, whether it be an e-commerce field or some kind of form that you're filling out. Now you have chat, and it's wide open. And now you can attack the data in all these different ways. And so I feel sorry for those folks that, the CISOs that are having to secure it or build policies based on a very large attack surface. So that's one thing there. But to your point is, how do we elevate our work level? How does each role get impacted in a positive way, also without being left behind, right? And also, so there's being left behind, optimizing your role with AI, and then allowing AI this disruption, this exploding earth. You want to envision AI kind of blowing up the status quo. But there's an opportunity with the rising tide that all the boats and the boats being roles are rising and not being left behind, not having your boat sink because you didn't change your job in a way that needs to change so you can protect your role. And I think every role is going to be impacted. Every role has to change. So including security, even a developer, an analyst, a product manager, an executive has to change. They have to use the tools first and foremost, but they also have to change how they go about their job and leveraging AI as much as possible. Some of those changes are easy for some are more difficult. People are, instead of using, say, Google or Bing to search, you need to maybe leverage Copilots or one of the many assistants like ChatGPT to do your research, right? So, there's a balance between the two.
A lot of people were jumping in and adopting because of the fear of missing out. I feel as if this is different in the sense that people are getting a lot of value out of it, using it for a lot of different things. But business adoption in a more structured way has been somewhat slower.
I think so. The companies that get it, the partners that I work with that get it, are measuring the value of their platform based on whether or not ChatGPT, as is, without building an LLM solution, custom solution, can ChatGPT give me the same answer that my platform used to give? So our general purpose assistants replacing my platform versus, say, a competitor giving me now better automation or better answers or better intelligence than my platform, right? These assistants are themselves competitors to every single platform I see. So, for example, I work with a couple of software vendors that build solutions that the office of a CFO would use, right? Whether it be understanding P&L, working with the board of directors on optimizing the business, right? Surfacing those insights to optimize the business. If there's a quarterly report that needs to be due, how do you construct it and create it very quickly and automate that process, right? LLMs are great for that. However, there are many steps in those phases that these folks are using ChatGPT or your assistant of choice to grab those insights. And that's problematic for some of these platforms. At what point do they use that instead of the platform? And these platforms are playing catch up to just those base values so that it's using the right contextual data, right? That's always been that, and that will remain a value add. It's the data itself and not necessarily the implementation of the solution. But yeah, I mean, these assistants are competitors. And the reason I bring this up is it's becoming more of a problem because by the time they blink, the assistants are getting so mature and so feature rich, and that you can itself add, like if you have a private link, for example, and they're not sharing your data, you could upload reports and say, give me insights on these reports. And you're just using ChatGPT at that point. You're not using the platform and you're giving it the contextual data. Now you got to worry about security and privacy. But that is a problem because overnight, these things are evolving so quickly that the platform developers are having a hard time keeping up with that. So I see the assistants themselves becoming the greatest competitor to all software platforms.
All right. So we've covered what's going wrong: model drift, hallucinations, and even sycophancy. And we've seen just how difficult it can be to measure AI's impact without strong baselines or metrics. Which makes it clear, if we want to move forward, we need some standardization. That's where something new comes in: MCP, or Model Context Protocol. Christian flagged this as one of the most promising developments on the horizon. Think of MCP like a universal plug adapter for AI. It's a standard that lets AI connect seamlessly into your organization's systems, pulling real data, executing workflows, and doing it all in a unified way. Let's dig into what that means and why it could be such a game changer. We won't need browsers anymore, or maybe we won't need devices, but then again, are we really going to stop staring at devices all day? I don't know. That would be a future I'd like to embrace, to be honest.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. It's coming. And how software vendors, even including Microsoft, how we deal with it is, it's hopefully we're the ones generating those just-in-time applications and our platform is being used to generate them. And I think we're smart enough to stay ahead of that curve, but it is a challenge. Then the bigger the machine, the slower it may be to turn around and stay ahead of that curve. But you also have a different problem too. Because LLMs are doing so much for everybody, is it dumbing us down? Are we incapable of even answer basic questions because we don't bother to do our own research? We rely on things that the LLMs are providing us, the assistants are giving us. There's decision paralysis now because they need to first check with ChatGPT to see if it's accurate or not. And I see this with the youth too. I mean, the Gen Zers and younger was it Gen Alpha, going to be using these tools to make every decision in their lives.
I can see why people would think we're heading in that direction. I do think that there will need to be some course correction, as there has been with all new technology and innovations. But I do see a lot of value in the future for this, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, is there a specific trend or tool that's gotten you excited recently? I'm curious.
I've been really focused on the new code generators. They are maturing to a point where, okay, now we're at a point where, okay, we're getting past basic code into something more sophisticated. And how far can we push them? So I think they're getting quite good. And so I'm trying to, obviously, I use GitHub Copilot. I think it's fantastic. But there are very good code generators out there. I've been really focusing on them. And those are obviously, being a developer myself, I think, or at least part-time, I don't get to develop as much as I like, but that's been my more excitement. But I think it's getting easier now than ever. There's one product a lot of folks haven't heard of. It's called LM Studio, and it allows you to play with any open source model, bring it down on your own machine, as long as you have the firepower to do it and use it. But the models are getting so quantized, they're getting so small that you can even run even on a laptop now. But that's exciting because now you can really quickly evaluate models without having to just always go with the big boys in your solution. That's actually one of my favorite tools right now. And then there's the image generators are a lot of fun. Nano Banana and Google's done a terrific job. And I think we're catching up now again with that, with the latest developments with image generation in GPT-5. So we're going head to head, of course, with OpenAI's help. So image generation is maturing considerably. It's pretty scary what it can do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as we think about the way enterprises are adopting this technology, because that's where the significant value is, in theory, through orchestration, saving time, being able to do more, getting greater insights. If we were to sit down again in 1 year, 2 years from now, what would success for enterprise AI look like in your mind?
That's a really good question. And it's so fast paced, it's really hard to predict right now. I think success would look like where AI is just pervasive and part of almost every business. It'd be like businesses back in the tech boom in the late 90s, where if you didn't have an e-commerce site or a website and a rich, well-developed website, that you would be left behind, right? I think the same it's the same thing with AI. I think it's a cost of doing business as AI is going to be as pervasive as just software. So while software ate the world, AI is now eating software. And so it's really the same kind of thing that we went through, and I'm old enough to have gone through that. And of course you had the tech wreck, right? So I don't see that same kind of bubble bursting. I don't think the comparisons that people are making are valid. I think these companies are very mature. You do have some fly-by-night AI companies, but they aren't necessarily going public. So I don't think it's going to disrupt the stock market anytime soon. So I think that's what success is. AI is absolutely part of it, and for good reason, not because it's a new toy. It's something that they're truly seeing lift their business, making customer service something that they just use as an agent that completely eliminates call time. And it's already doing that. We're seeing that now. And I can't imagine any reputable product not having a really good chatbot to answer most of folks' questions without the consumer being annoyed, right? So I hope all businesses are going to get to that point. And I think they will. I really do. I think they will. And so I think we're growing up. And so now with the complexity, these companies are just trying to figure out how to measure value. I think the value is already there, especially internally with the roles that are, say, whether you're a developer or analyst or using the AI tools. How do you measure that value of all the things that go into making their products now? There's value there, but there's a ton of intrinsic value. That's what you also have to measure. So I think that's there. I think it's just surfacing that value.
Yeah. As I think about some of the other advancements, right? A database, allow organizations to get better insight quickly, make decisions faster. Websites, e-commerce allowed to sell and distribute, market to a larger population of people, right? Gain a larger market share. It was about communication. It was about information processing. You were talking about getting insights faster, being able to make decisions faster. Still trying to wrap my head around what it's going to mean when we look back in 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what is that similar one or two word sentence that explains how this changed everything, so to speak? I mean, I think you're right. I think it is, organizations are going to have this baked into everything. And if it means that I never have any more bugs in my software, I never run into any more challenges with customer service, I'm all for it, right? If my flight will never be delayed, that'd be amazing.
I think, honestly, this is the one I can guarantee. I think overall, more jobs, I think it's less about job replacement or versus job optimization. The roles and the work that is being done, I think is going to become more enjoyable. That it'll be easier to have work-life balance. I think it'll be easier to be satisfied. Innovation is fast. Now, it's not more about applying new ideas than it is about understanding and having the engineering talent to get going, right? You can get going very quickly now. And so now one of the challenges is entry-level development is tough. These kids coming out of school that want to be developers, their pace has to pick up. And so I think that's going to be the biggest challenge is the entry level or the new entrants into that world is they have their own challenges. And that starts with universities too. They have their own problem of making sure that what's turned in is actual, not AI generated work, right? So they're going to have to present them with different types of homework to make it more human and in the process better prepare them for the job market.
Well, if we're talking about making work more enjoyable, I think a lot of people would be excited about that, Christian.
I think so. I myself am benefiting.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. I enjoyed it. Thank you. You reminding me of some things that I need to think about in my job. Everybody gets they keep their heads down and they do their job, but they forget to step back and go, oh, wow, okay. This is something that I need to think about as well. So yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you letting me on.
What a valuable conversation with Christian. It seems the only constant in AI is change. To me, Christian outlines how success and ROI depend on staying disciplined. And that comes in a couple of forms: measuring outcomes, grounding your models in truth, unifying systems, and taking advantage of these as they get smarter. If we do that, the future won't just be about managing complexity, but it'll become about making work better and possibly more joyful. Thanks for tuning in to Edge of IT. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. Until next time.